Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Rose. And every Tuesday this December, we're looking at different aspects of open source. Today, we have a very special guest who's going to be talking to us about how to use open source to get into working in technology for the first time, and what kind of projects might be available to help you get paid while you do it. Today, I'm speaking with
Vaishali Thakkar, and I'm a Linux evangelist, and I work as an associate Linux kernel engineer at Oracle. I also co-organize 3 months open source scholarship program named Rails Girls Summer of Code.
And we're going to be talking a lot about Rails Girls Summer of Code today. How did you first hear about it?
I came to know about this via internet. So I was actually already part of the another program called Outreachy, and I was a participant over there. And then I heard about Rails Girls Summer of Code and how they work, and they were looking for some people to help them with organizing this stuff, and that's how I got involved with the program.
For listeners who may not already know, what is Rails Girls Summer of Code?
So basically, Rails Girls Summer of Code is a 3 months paid scholarship program to get more women and non-binary people into the open source. Say we first open the call for the projects, we select the project based on our criteria, and then we open the call for participation, and then a pair of students work for the 3 months on the open source project, and they get paid for the same.
Fantastic. So you take beginners in technology who are women and non-binary, and you give them a way to practice and upskill through open source and pay them.
Yes, definitely. We have project mentors, so they help them to have contributions in the open source project, and we also have a concept of coaches and supervisors. So supervisors are someone who link between organization and the students. They have weekly calls with the students. They get to track with the journey of the students, and they help them with the issues they face during the program.
That sounds like a really exciting program. And this is how you first started working in technology?
Yes, exactly. Though I started working in the technology first via the another program called Outreachy.
Of course. And can you remember your first pull request?
So my first open source contribution wasn't actually a pull request. It was actually a patch mail, because my first contribution was into the Linux kernel project, and we use mailing lists for the same.
Yeah.
So that was a patch mail which I sent into the kernel mailing list.
Your first open source contribution was on the Linux kernel.
Yes.
That sounds very much like getting started in hard mode. How very scary and exciting.
Yeah, yes, definitely Linux kernel being one of the largest open source project. It was definitely exciting to get a mail from the maintainer that your patch is accepted and it is now merged into a pull request. So, yeah.
Working with Outreachy and working with Rails Girls Summer of Code, do you see many other people getting into technology through open source?
Yes. So I think every person starting to launch their career in the tech industry come across this question of how to get a job in the area of your interest with the limited experience, because you are a junior developer, you are just starting with the tech, etc. And I guess that's where the open source comes into the picture, because for me, open source meant an open education. Open source not only allowed me to transition from being a user to becoming a developer of a software or tool, it also introduced me to the amazing open source communities. Like anything else, there is definitely a learning curve over there, but I think it is also important to have a supportive people who can help you in this transition. And I believe in most of the cases, open source contributions also reduces the aspect of going through a bunch of lengthy interviews for the first job. Like, as your contribution is already online and open, it's also easy for the recruiters to get an idea about your technical abilities and whether your technical skill set is matching with their expectations or not, etc.
That's a really good point. So not only are you working and building those skills, but you're working and building those skills in a really visible way where people can come along and say, especially people who know what they're doing and people who know the tech themselves can say, I see that you've done this here. Do you want to come do this and we'll pay you for it?
Yes, exactly. Also, I think when we go for the companies and stuff, the team building is important thing. So recruiters also see these as a skill that you need to work in a team in a better way, how you are communicating with the people, etc. And as in open source, everything is transparent over there. So your communication with the other people on your pull requests, on your contributions, and how you are approaching the problems and how you are taking comments seriously and working on them to better your contribution. I think that is also something which is useful for both recruiters and you to match up the skills and the job positions they are looking for.
That's a fantastic point that when you're in open source, you're not just writing code, you're not just contributing, you're also taking part in a community, and that it's really important to not be a jerk when you get into that community.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Usually, I think I see that a lot of people sometimes discouraged because of the certain people's behavior. And whenever I have some personal contacts and they behave like this, I usually advise them to just be clear about that. The comments they are giving is on the code of a contributor and not on the person themselves. And that's really important. This as a clear message, I guess.
No, that's a really valuable point. So if you were speaking to somebody who wanted to get into technology and they wanted to get started with open source, what kind of advice would you give them?
My first advice would be to try scratching your own itch. So, like, do experiments with the code, build and break this stuff, tinker around the open source tools, technologies of your interest, because everything is open over there. And then try to fix the problem in that. Because I believe the basic idea of a technology is about problem solving. So, to find and fix the problems in something, you first need to understand the problem, and it definitely helps if you're a user of that thing first. So, scratching your own itch can be the really good way to start with your open source contribution. Again, with the discouragement, I think if your first contribution or PR gets rejected, then I think you shouldn't be discouraged, because for the health of an open source project, discussion on the PRs is necessary, and transparency is a way to handle the open source communities and projects. So ask questions, work on the comments received by the existing contributors or the maintainers, and do not take these comments personally, because most of the time these comments are on your code and not yourselves.
And for folks who've never interacted with open source before, when you talk about that first pull request, if I'm getting into open source the very first time, should I just go find a project and then send it a pull request? Or should I do something first or interact with people in some way?
I think there are many ways to get into the open source, and code is not the only way, because there is documentation where the work is required, there is community involvement where the work is required. A lot of the big open source projects have local user groups where the people tries to get more people involved in the projects in some other way, like evangelism, etc. So I think that would be a first way for you to get involved with the projects and to know more about the projects. And then you can just, as you have already talked with the people who are already involved with the project, I think you can get that confidence that how that particular community is working, and then you can go for finding the contributions you want to make into the open source projects.
We've been talking a lot how people getting into open source can do different things, how things like Outreachy or Rails Girls Summer of Code might help you get in and help you pay your bills while you do it. And we've talked a lot about how to make that first pull request and how to get involved with the community and how to be nice. But what can open source projects do to make it easier for new developers to get involved?
I think one of the first thing is definitely a documentation, because I think it anyway takes time even for the seasoned developers to figure out how things works if open source project don't have proper documentation. So I agree that code is a base documentation to understand what is happening over there. But documentations are good to understand the original developer's perspective behind that code. So specifically for the new technologists who might be coming from the completely different background, have never worked with this kind of transparent environments, I think docs helps them to avoid mistakes. So having a proper documentation is definitely one of the things to get more contributors for your projects. And transparency is also one of the good thing. I think it would be good if there are people who, for example, when someone is sending a first pull request, it helps if you just say that thanks for your contribution in our projects, thanks for taking time to have this contribution in our project, and then you can start with your comments based on the construction of the code and stuff like that. So I think it would be really encouraging for the new contributors.
That's a really good point. Treating a first open source contribution, and maybe even every contribution, if you're at a low enough volume, as a conversation and say, do you know what? Here's some feedback, or even just thank you very much for your time.
Yes, definitely. So I take in my free time, I also take Linux kernel workshops in the universities. And at the end of the workshop, I have this slide which says that welcome to the Linux kernel community. And people really feel good that people who are part of certain project are saying that they are welcome to contribute in their project and they are ready to help them with their first contributions. So I think just saying this kind of lines can also be encouraging for the people, I guess.
No, that's really, really fantastic point. Thank you. So if you could change open source in some way, if you say, do you know what, I'm just going to make a tweak here and a change here, how would you like to see open source change to make it more sort of newbie friendly, more welcoming for those beginners?
So for the small projects, I think we already have GitHub, and we have different tags like beginner friendly and help wanted, etc. But probably some of the big projects, as of now, the problem is they don't really have a specific kind of newbie fast contribution kind of stuff. So they're having a list of the tasks for the newbies, and then having a sort of people who can mentor them in one or other way. They don't need to give them regular check up on them regularly, but just to help them with in a little things, like if something is not working, they can just answer over there, having a small IRC channels or the Slack channels or the mailing list specifically, where the people are encouraging newbies and are patient enough to answer the questions of the newbies, can definitely help to get more contributors for your projects.
This sounds like some really concrete advice, and it actually sounds like some really small steps. It's not a huge thing to mark newbie issues. It's not a huge thing to make yourself available or make someone available to solve questions.
Yes, definitely.
So let's do a little bit of a loop around and come back to chatting about Rails Girls Summer of Code for a bit. Maybe our dear listener is new to tech. Maybe our dear listener is non-binary or is a woman who's really interested in getting paid for the summer. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process of signing up for Rails Girls Summer of Code and a little bit about what that process felt like, what doing the actual internship was like?
Yes, definitely. If you are someone who wants to participate in the Rails Girls Summer of Code, we usually open the call for the applications in sometime around, I guess, April and May. And then we have a full list of the application form where you need to describe about your previous experiences, and we have like pretty good kind of questions over there so that we can get an idea about what you want from this scholarship and how we can match up with your expectations, etc. Then we have a selection process by the selection committee, and which lasts for roughly around a month. And then finally, a few selected teams, we have final round of interviews where we talk about again this stuff and how it works, and if you will be selected, how we will be working, etc. Once we announce the teams which are selected by the selection committees, we have 3 months scholarship program where people regularly work with the mentors. They have timelines, they have list of tasks they work on, they learn the skills which are required to work on those projects, and then we assign separate supervisors for each team. So supervisor takes weekly calls with each teams, and if they are having some issues in the communication with the mentors or with the organization, then they can solve that. It's just a way to they track your progress every week. Also, we have something called daily logs. As this is a full-time scholarship program, participants who are selected by us writes these daily logs, and there they can just write about the stuff they have learned during the day, the skills they have acquired, and how communicating with the mentors or the communicating with the community open source projects and their teammate as well works. So that's how the program works basically.
So a lot of the stuff in the beginning, coming in and having an initial interview and then waiting a month sounds like a really stressful time to wait. I hope it wasn't too bad.
Yes, but I think this also depends on the number of applications we receive. For example, last year we received 190 applications, so it was really hard, and at the time also really hard for us to select only 20 teams for that, because we had on a fund which can only we can only fund the 20 teams at that time, so it was really hard for us to select the best 20 of them. So yes.
Yeah. So I imagine it's hard both for folks to wait, and the decision process sounds really stressful. Yeah, having to choose just 20 teams out of 190. Can people apply to participate in this program from anywhere in the world, or do they need to be located in a certain place?
The program is a global, but so basically it's a team of the participants. So one team consists of two people. So both of these people needs to be in the same location, because the idea of this is a pair programming. So you need to be in touch with your partner on a daily basis. So we require both of these participants to be in the same location. But we don't really have location specific stuff. So you can be located anywhere in the world, but just you two need to be in the same location.
So you and your partner need to be together, but the project you're working on and your mentors can be anywhere in the world?
Yes, exactly. But there is also a concept of coaches, and coaches are someone who helps people with the technology they are learning, which is required for the project. So in that case, coaches are also required. So basically we allow both kind of coaches. We allow local and remote coaches as well. So it would be helpful if there are two local coaches and two remote coaches in the same place, so that people can interact with them and solve the issues if they comes up in a manner, because having in the same time zone really helps to solve the issues really fast.
So it's possible to have a team of two people and two coaches in the same city as you, and two remote coaches. So is it possible, you're saying, to have 4 coaches per team?
Yes, it's possible. Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of support.
Yes.
That's absolutely wonderful. Do you know of any other programs that do anything similar?
I think Outreachy is also about getting underrepresented groups of the people into the open source. So they have this 3 months internship program where participants work on the specific projects. And the idea, I think, comes from the Google Summer of Code program. So both of them works in a similar way, I guess.
No, that's great that there's different options out there in the world. If you were chatting to someone who didn't qualify or didn't have time for an internship like this, one of these programs, are there any things you would recommend for them getting started in open source and trying to get into tech sort of on their own?
Yes, I think if you don't really have full time to give to the internships or scholarships like this, probably you can just manage time by your own. You can just select the projects based on your interests and then get started with it, tinkering around the small tasks. And in my experience, as I have interacted with many of such kind of people, I think at some or other point you will definitely find a mentor from the open source communities who can help you with getting more involved in this way. And then I think conferences or meetups, etc., local user groups are good for finding mentors like that. And then attending the conferences are also good to interact more with the open source communities.
So that's a really, really good point, that by getting stuck in, starting to participate, meeting people and growing your network, you can get a lot of the same benefits that you might get from a more structured program.
Yes.
And I also wanted to chat to you a bit about job hunting after a program like this, or job hunting after getting into technology through open source. What's that like? So you're working at Oracle now.
Yes.
How did you find your job?
So I completed my So I was actually into the formal computer science education, and I completed my outreach internship into the last year of my education. So I graduated with the computer science degree after that, and then I wanted to work in the Linux kernel only. So yes, definitely, it's somehow hard because what this program offers you is about a certain period of time to learn about this stuff and contribute in an open source. But then next step for you will be to find a job, and that is something you need to do by your own. So I was used to attend a lot of meetups, and I also started looking for the jobs online. And one of the things I was really sure about was to work in the open source only. So I didn't really apply for the jobs which were saying that you need to work on the proprietary softwares. So that's how I came across the job applications and job positions. And one of the advice I would like to give is people shouldn't be shy about saying that they are looking for the jobs, because a lot of the time companies are really willing to hire the junior developers, but they are just not opening the positions over there. So if there are some positions which match up with your skill and you really want to work on those stuff, then probably you can just apply for them, and you can, who knows, that you can just get the replies from the managers and they will be ready to hire you as a junior developer, because a lot of the people and a lot of the teams are also ready to help junior developers to get their skills into the industry and help them build their portfolios, etc.
This is really good advice to sort of get out in the community when you're looking, let people know you're looking. Don't be shy about saying, I'm looking for work right now, just to get the most benefit out of being out there in those communities.
Yes. So, for example, as part of after the Outreachy, we usually for the Linux kernel interns, we have Outreachy kernel panel, which happens in one or other Linux Foundation events. So, at the time of my Outreachy internship period, I didn't get the visa to go for that, but my mentor actually talked about my project in that panel, and I just had one slide. And at the end of the slide, I wrote that I'm looking for a job. That is something just was conveyed and displayed over the projector. And I really got the messages from the people who were in the audience on the talk. And I think that was a really good way for me to even build the connections, even if I didn't meet people personally over there.
That's a fantastic idea. So, yeah, being a little bit creative in the job hunt probably isn't going to hurt you.
Yes, definitely.
And looking back, so you've had a really interesting pathway into tech. It sounds like programs like Outreachy and Rails Girl Summer of Code were really important to that journey. But looking back, what kind of advice would you give yourself if you were starting over?
So I think for me, it started with the Outreachy, and I started looking for the open source projects to work on, etc. But basically, this started when I was into the third or fourth year of the university, because I got fractured and I got relief from the university on the assignments. So basically, I transitioned from theory to practical at that time. So if I want to go back and change the things, then I think I would like to go more into the practical stuff in the beginning only, and then just, tinker around this stuff. What if the theory is saying something, I would like to know more about how that works in a practical way, or in the tech actually happening over the globe. And I think that would be something I would really like to go for.
Cool. So you would have told yourself to go ahead and get stuck into the practical aspects a little bit faster.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. You've offered us some fantastic advice, and I really appreciate you appearing today.
Thank you so much for inviting me over this podcast. Really, that really means a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Come back next Tuesday, we'll have a brand new episode, and we're going to be looking at what it feels like to be managing and maintaining a large open source project.